There you are, cooking old hag. Emily said that when she brought a cake while visiting, but my husband became upset at the action I took in response. What are you doing? Apologize to Emily. I can assure you I didn't do anything to deserve such fury, so I think it's time to clear things up with them. Did you look inside the cake? I am Barbara, a 72-year-old housewife, and I also work part-time outside making meals. Having loved cooking since I was young, influenced by my mother, I decided to attend a culinary school after graduating from high school. Upon graduation, I obtained my chef's license and have been working for a temp culinary company ever since. I've continued to make meals that I hope are both healthy and tasty in various places, like company cafeterias, hospitals, and nursing homes. Although I worked as a full-time staff member for many years, I am now a part-time employee due to my age. Yet, I'm still happy to be able to work while doing what I love, cooking. At home, despite doing the cooking and household chores, my husband hardly ever expresses gratitude. My husband, George, prefers not to cook, unable to even find drinks without calling for me. Hey, Barbara, get me some tea. Yes, I told you the tea leaves, pot, and cups are in this cabinet. I don't care, you should do it. Despite being incapable of doing anything around the house himself, his pride as a former executive of a top company is very high. And he worries about what would happen to me. We have a son and a daughter, and our son, Michael, got married 2 years ago. Michael was over 30, which is a common age for marriage, so when he introduced his partner, I was overjoyed. Ideally, he would have introduced her before getting married, but due to her wish to register the marriage on her birthday, it ended up being a post-factum announcement. Michael has always been responsible, and at my age, I have no intention of meddling in his relationships. On the promised day, we met her for the first time at our house. She was petite with expressive eyes, and the difference between her and Michael was stark. Emily, the woman Michael married, had lived at home until then, working as a professional since graduating from junior college. I was raised strictly and never allowed to live alone. I'm a beginner at household chores, but I'll do my best. With a high-pitched voice and an upward glance, Emily seemed like an idol straight out of a TV show. Right after she finished speaking, George's uncontrollable joy burst out. That earnestness is your greatest weapon. Just be yourself. George seemed to fall for her at first sight, charmed by her spirited and adorable demeanor. Her cuteness and earnestness, which I lack, must have been refreshing for George, but it gives me a bad feeling. For a while, we listened to stories about her student days, her life as a working adult, and how she and Michael met. But the atmosphere suddenly changed at one point. Barbara, what happened to your hand? I cut it a bit at work. Maybe because I was in a hurry. That looks painful. But what do you mean, in a hurry? I work part-time in the culinary field, and it happened while I was working. I'm at this age, so I moved from a full-time position to part-time. But I still work full hours just like before. When she learned that I work as a chef, her expression became indescribably subtle. Working part-time in the culinary field, does that mean you're like one of those ladies cooking in a cafeteria? A cafeteria lady, huh? Well, in my case, more like a veteran in the culinary field. As I laughed off the comment with a light joke, George started teasing me. This one, cooking at home and outside, must be crazy, right? A cooking hag, I tell you. He must have thought it was funny. Normally, Michael would chide George, but he was away in the bathroom, so no one was there to stop George's tirade. I was taken aback and at a loss for words, but what accelerated the situation was something I never expected from Emily. A cooking hag, exactly. Cooking nonstop both at the cafeteria and at home. I'm all for my beloved husband, so no worries there. Her reply left me speechless, and I couldn't find the words to respond. However, as if nothing had happened, she went back to chatting with Michael, who had returned from the bathroom. I was just hearing about you, Barbara. You're such a hard worker. I'll take a leaf out of your book and do my best too. As evening came and Michael and his wife left, my feelings remained clouded. Having my decades of prideful work ridiculed, and her facade of amiability in front of Michael, left me with an inescapable sense of unease. I thought we got along fairly well with our eldest son and his wife. We would give each other souvenirs from trips or deliver extra dishes we had made. Sometimes, for birthdays, we would even dine at a nice restaurant to celebrate. However, as we spent more time with them, I began to feel a growing uneasiness towards Emily. Emily and I are connected on social media, and her posts have been bothering me. In a post about a restaurant we went to for George's birthday, I was cropped out in an unnatural way. There were also times when she posted about alcohol and dishes I made, pretending as if she had made them herself. Looking forward to enjoying the homemade alcohol with my husband. Wonder if the pickles are ready? They must be delicious with all the love put into them. Emily is gaining followers as a diligent housewife, and despite her recent posts, they already receive a considerable number of comments. I stared at the screen filled with praises for Emily. No one seems to think she's falsely claiming others' work as her own. Isn't it embarrassing to blatantly lie about making something that isn't yours? Though I had these thoughts, it didn't directly harm me, so I figured we could continue to maintain a moderate relationship. However, I would soon realize that Emily was more dangerous than I had anticipated. I had an abnormal finding in one of my health checkup items and needed to be examined at a major hospital. After being examined, I was diagnosed with cancer and had to be hospitalized for tests and treatment. I'll be hospitalized for a while for cancer treatment. Please take care of the house. To just go off to the hospital and then say, "Take care of the house," is quite convenient, isn't it? Why would he say such a thing when his wife is sick and about to be hospitalized? However, angering George at this point would only cause trouble, so I swallowed my words. Don't say that. I'd be happy if you could visit me sometimes. Who would bother to come see your face? I don't know anything about house chores. Right, Michael might know more about these things than you. After discussing with Michael, he assured me he would visit me during his work breaks, which was a relief. Since there were still a few days until Michael's visit, I decided to gather the laundry and other things I wanted to ask him to bring. Then, I heard the sound of someone entering my hospital room. I heard from Michael. I was worried and came to visit you. Emily visited me with a white box from the cake shop in front of the station in her hand. Oh, Emily, it's bad of me to trouble you when you're busy. Thank you for visiting. Michael is coming next Sunday, but George is utterly uninvolved. I'm glad you came. Then, Emily smiled sweetly and placed the white box on the side table. Please get well soon. I bought the cake you said you liked, so please enjoy it. Thank you. Since you went to the trouble, let's eat it together. But Emily started to prepare to leave with a light wave of her hand. I have a little errand to run. Please enjoy it, Barbara. Oh, there are 2 cakes inside. Emily left the room after a brief conversation. Despite her occasional problematic remarks, it was nice of her to visit me with a gift. Just as I was thinking this, George entered the room, almost crossing paths with Emily. You came? Yes, just passing by. Emily was here, wasn't she? He sat down heavily on the chair beside me as we talked. Yes, Emily just visited. Michael will come in 2 or 3 days, but before that, she left this cake as a gift. She said there were 2. So would you like to eat one? Typical Emily, always so considerate. I'd like the cheesecake. At that moment, I felt a sense of unease and was certain my concern was justified. I snatched the box back and tossed it into the trash can at my feet, causing the box to crumple with a crunch. Hey, what are you doing? Emily went to the trouble of buying that cake. You're throwing away the cake she thoughtfully chose for you. You're the worst. Are you trying to bully your daughter-in-law now? I immediately questioned George. Did you look inside the cake? No, I haven't. What's that got to do with anything? He seemed not to understand what I was getting at. Don't talk about bullying. If you think it's bullying, then try the cake that isn't the cheesecake you mentioned. Right here, in front of me. I'm fine, I don't like whipped cream anyway. Who said anything about a whipped cream cake? George seems perplexed, as if he doesn't understand, but does he not realize what he's saying? All I said was that there were 2 cakes. Isn't it strange that you chose a cheesecake without even seeing what was inside? Well, I just thought it might be a cheesecake. It seems he still hasn't realized the important point, so I decided to enlighten him. Moreover, after I threw the cake in the trash, I only mentioned trying the one that wasn't a cheesecake. What did you say to that? I don't remember what I said. George is laughing while looking up, a clear sign he's trying to dodge the issue. You said you were fine without it because you don't like whipped cream. As if you already knew there was a cheesecake and a whipped cream cake inside. That's just nitpicking words, what you're doing is dirty. He's red-faced and trying to brush this off in a fit of anger, so I pressed on further. You haven't opened the box, and it's not damaged enough to see inside, yet you claim to know what's inside. It's obvious you already knew what was in it. Don't be ridiculous. I didn't see Emily buying the cake, so I definitely don't know anything. Say whatever you want. For now, try the one that's not the cheesecake. If there's nothing wrong, I'll apologize for accusing you of bullying our daughter-in-law. Hearing the word apology, George's eyes lit up, seeing a chance to turn the tables. But this isn't where it ends. If there's something wrong with the cake, I'll call Emily right away. I retrieved the cake box from the trash and found a cheesecake and a fruit cake loaded with whipped cream inside, just as George had said. It's a bit damaged but still good enough for a taste test. I placed the whipped cream-laden fruit cake on a paper plate and handed it to George with a disposable fork. George grimaced and muttered under his breath as soon as he tasted it. Ugh. Salty. Disgusting. That cake is salty, isn't it? I knew because... Now, as promised, call Emily here. Right now. And don't say anything strange when calling her. Or you'll have to answer to me. As promised, I had George call Emily to the hospital room. Reluctantly making the call, George's usual cheerful demeanor was nowhere to be found. His usual upbeat demeanor was nowhere to be seen, probably because his wife, who had seen through everything, was watching. It was like a minion reporting a failed mission to the boss. While I was thinking this, Emily soon entered the room. What's the matter? I rushed over here after getting a call from George. Did I forget something? I can be so scatterbrained, sorry. Emily probably doesn't realize that her plan has been exposed. I handed her the box with the cake I had just taken out of the trash. Right, you forgot something. This box is meant for me, right? Of course. You were talking about how exquisite the whipped cream cakes here are. You know I have taste disturbances from cancer treatment, right? Emily covered her mouth with her hand in surprise, as if hearing it for the first time. Was that the case? I had no idea. She still seems intent on playing dumb, so I decided to corner her. This whipped cream, George said it's salty. Did you know that strong salty flavors could interfere with treatment? Realizing the plan had failed, Emily glared at George with a fierce look. Blaming her co-conspirator wouldn't help, so Emily, perhaps trying to cover up, was clearly scrambling for an excuse. It's strange. Whipped cream being salty. That must be it, the bakery must have mixed up sugar and salt. I'll talk to them, so don't worry. You think not knowing about the taste disturbances and the cake being salty is going to cut it? It's not my fault I didn't know. If we keep blaming every mistake, we'll end up being disliked, right? I'm sorry. But I don't have the professional knowledge like you, so I'll be leaving now. As Emily was about to leave the room, I rushed to the door, locked it, and leaned against it to prevent her from leaving. It can't be helped is something the person who was wronged should say, not you. Are you going to talk to the bakery? After bringing a homemade cake in a bakery box, what are you going to say to them? So what, Mom never makes mistakes? Amazing, I respect that. Emily's tone was provocative, but engaging in a fight wouldn't solve anything. I picked up my tablet from the bed and opened a search engine. The search history showed cancer treatment interference foods, salt cancer progression, taste disturbances salt, and similar entries. For some reason, this tablet has a search history I don't remember making. Could it be a misunderstanding on your part, Barbara? But I haven't used this tablet recently. And when I checked the history, it looks like it was around the time you two came home for the New Year's. You wanted to use it to watch a live stream of your favorite idol, if I remember correctly. I didn't miss the twitching on Emily's face. Are you suggesting that I searched for cancer progression just because I borrowed it once? Please stop making baseless accusations. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. This icon here looks like your favorite idol. It seems you forgot to log out. Seeing the icon, Emily turned pale, and her hands started trembling. I knew you didn't like me, but there's a line you shouldn't cross, right? This is like poisoning, what you're doing is criminal. Emily, clearly infuriated at being accused of a crime, lashed out in anger. I did nothing wrong. It's because you've been unpleasant to me, right? I just wanted to show you that being able to cook doesn't make you superior. You should be grateful for that. I truly have no idea what she's talking about. I've hardly discussed my work or cooking with Emily. I've only brought homemade alcohol and dishes to them a handful of times. I never intended to boast, but if you felt uncomfortable with my stories, I apologize. However, that doesn't justify your actions. As I firmly stated this, Emily became hysterical in the hospital room. After all I've taught you, you still don't get it, you old hag. Is a woman who can cook really that great? Gloating just because you've won over some stomachs. George, who had been quietly standing to the side, unexpectedly chimed in. Since calling Emily into the hospital room, George had been as inconspicuous as air in a corner, but suddenly, he started to intrude into the conversation. That's right. A woman's worth is her charm. But you've always been out working, never showing the determination to protect the home. Just because you have some cooking certificate doesn't make you any better. So, you're still here. You're really taking Emily's side, aren't you? You knew your duty was to ensure I finished the salt-laden cake. So what if that's true? It's none of your business. We were even discussing moving in with Emily and her family soon. You can live on your own. So you'd be better off living modestly in some room. It seems George and my eldest son and his wife had arranged to live together without me. This is the first I've heard of moving in together, and George's words make it clear he wants me out of the house as soon as possible. What have you been thinking all this time? Moving in together must have been Emily's idea, right? That's right, unlike you, she's kind and considerate. She felt sorry for me being alone at home because you never properly took care of the house. This is why I always said you should be able to manage the house on your own, but this is just reaping what you sow. This salt-laden cake, it's all about my medical insurance or something, isn't it? How did you come to that conclusion? You seem to have thoroughly read through the policies and even called the insurance company. I got a call from them. They told me quite a bit. And that's how I figured it out. Thinking that they plan to prolong my treatment to use the insurance money for living together with my eldest son and his wife is terrifying. It's lucky I found out through the search history and the call from the insurance company. But I shudder to think what would have happened if I hadn't noticed. Michael seemed completely unaware of George and Emily's malicious actions towards me. And he took their interference with my treatment very seriously, leading to his decision to divorce Emily. Emily was quite resistant to the idea of divorce. However, Michael's decision was firm. He couldn't overlook the gravity of their actions and the casual manner in which they were taken. So he didn't revoke the divorce. Thanks to the success of my cancer treatment, I was discharged from the hospital. Although I couldn't overexert myself, I managed to return to my part-time role as a cook. My company being a temp agency meant I worked in various locations, and I was assigned to a local hospital soon after returning. One of the special menu items for today's breakfast received a lot of comments, but is this name familiar? Despite the different last name, a food ticket bore a name I recognized. Afterwards, I found out that Emily was hospitalized, based on her age and characteristics. It seems her mental balance was disturbed following the divorce, leading to her hospitalization. Known for her complaints about food and lifestyle, she was causing quite a headache for the staff. When delivering meals, I encountered Emily causing a scene with the staff. So the rumors about the cooking hag were true. This woman is why I'm stuck here. Why not hospitalize her instead? She exclaimed. Your nonsense is as absurd as ever. Besides, I have work to do, I can't afford to entertain you, I responded. Emily's actions had made her quite unpopular among the staff, who treated her warily. Emily remains oblivious to the extent she is disliked due to her own actions, which is typical of her. She seems to be a weak person, unable to face the truth and always finding excuses. With the divorce of the eldest son and his wife, the plans for George to live with them have been cancelled. Given the circumstances, it must be awkward for George to continue living under the same roof as if nothing has changed. And he appears to be uncomfortable. It's been a relief to see my daughter, who has become more available due to her work, visit occasionally. However, the one change in George might be that he has started to learn a bit about household tasks. With occasional visits from my daughter, George is being thoroughly taught the basics of household chores, sandwiched between my daughter and me. Given the uncertainty of the future, I hoped he would become more self-sufficient. Teaching George household skills at this stage was challenging, but necessary for our future life together. When making soup, you can adjust the flavor with spices, but instant options are fine when you're short on time. With today's conveniences, it's a waste not to use them, I advised. I never knew so much effort went into making soup. I was wrong before, calling it taking shortcuts, George admitted. It's okay, you just didn't know. Learning now is what matters, I reassured him. George's realization of how much he had taken for granted and the difficulty of household chores was a wake-up call. Recently, he even began to express gratitude, a small but significant change. I hoped George and I could once again work together to build a life that is truly ours. The hot spring trip was suggested by my husband, and it was supposed to be a delightful time just for the two of us. However, my husband brought along our son and his wife, with whom I have a strained relationship. And he did so without even telling me. And upon arriving at the hotel at our destination, my son's wife bluntly said to me, "If you dislike being with Mike and me so much, why don't you sleep in the parking lot or somewhere around there?" Her words, mocking me along with my son, and my husband's failure to intervene, brought me to my breaking point. Fine. Do as you please. I'll be sleeping outside then, bye. With that, I spat out and got into the rental car parked in the hotel parking lot, heading out for a night stroll to clear my mind. As I enjoyed wandering the streets until dawn, I heard the sirens of ambulances and fire engines. When I turned my phone back on, which I had previously turned off, I found an incredible number of missed calls from my husband and son. What the hell are you doing? How many times do you think we called and texted you? When I answered the call, my husband and son were begging, saying their careless smoking had caused a fire scare at the hotel. I was utterly appalled by my husband and son, who did not even show a hint of apology at this point. So, I gave my husband one last chance and asked him, "Hey, which is more important to you, Mike and his wife or me?" What? What's with that all of a sudden? Is this the time to be asking that? Just come back already. I see, that's fine. Well, Mike is your child with that woman anyway, and it seems like I'm no longer in your eyes. Hearing these words, my husband and son were perplexed on the other end of the phone, and that's when I decided to spill a secret. A hidden secret between my husband and son that we had been carrying within our marriage. My name is Elizabeth, 46 years old. This year marks the 20th anniversary of my marriage to James, and we both work for a hobby manufacturer company. With James in sales and me in accounting, just as we have been since our marriage. And between us, we were blessed with a son, Mike, who has become a delightful part of our lives by marrying Jennifer, a girl he met in the same university. To outsiders, we might appear as a normal, happy family, but in reality, we are facing a certain issue. One day, as I was preparing dinner after returning home, I noticed James researching something on the computer. "James, what are you looking up?" Curious, I peered over, and to my surprise, James was on a travel agency's website. Beautiful resorts and hot springs were displayed on the screen, and I couldn't help but lean in closer with excitement. To which James turned to me and said, "Actually, I've been thinking about planning a trip soon." "A trip? That sounds wonderful." I couldn't contain my excitement and raised my voice. "See, we've both been busy working and haven't had much chance for this kind of thing. Don't you think it's about time we let loose a bit?" "Yes, I've been feeling the same way. Fortunately, outside of our busy seasons, we both have flexible schedules that allow for time off." Just thinking about the trip made me giddy with excitement, something that hadn't happened in years. Though James initially helped with household chores after our marriage, he eventually stopped, citing work as the reason, leaving me to handle most of it. This trip, suggested by James himself, was a much-needed break from the accumulated fatigue and stress. More than anything, I was happy that my husband, who usually only showed interest in his work and rarely conversed with me, suggested we go on a trip together. The trip is a great idea, but there's something I've been hesitant to talk to you about. Hesitant about what? What is it? You know what I'm talking about. It's about Mike and Jennifer. Hearing our son and daughter-in-law's names made my expression darken. Indeed, since advancing to junior high, Mike had grown distant and cold towards me, his mother. Ignoring my attempts to talk, he would lock himself in his room or go out, and on the rare occasions he did respond, it was with a dismissive, "It's nothing," or "Leave me alone." At times, he was outright rude, demanding, "Hurry up with the food," or "Give me some pocket money." And there were instances when I was locked out of the house, not just by the door but by a chained gate. Initially, I dismissed it as a phase of rebellion, but when his harsh words and actions persisted, I grew concerned and consulted James several times. However, James brushed it off, saying, "Isn't that just a phase of rebellion, or maybe just adolescence? You should understand that and deal with him properly as a mother," showing little concern for the matter. I tried to reach out to Mike, but his attitude remained unchanged. After advancing to high school, he moved into a dormitory, lived in one during university as well, and hardly ever returned home. Even after marrying Jennifer, I wasn't invited to their wedding, and my letters of congratulations went unanswered. When Mike brought his wife Jennifer home, I immediately sensed a mismatch. Her brightly dyed hair, heavy makeup, and flamboyant attire made her appear like a gal, even at her age. In front of James and Mike, Jennifer behaved normally, but the moment we were alone, she stared at me, then glared, and said, "I wondered what kind of woman the mother of Mike would be, only to find out she's this plain. No wonder Mike detests you." From her derogatory words and expression, I thought she was indeed a perfect match for Mike. Interestingly, they didn't have any children and seemed to live a carefree life. Despite their apparent dislike for me, similar to Mike's, they began to frequent our house from the day of their introduction, often with Mike. When they visited, Mike and Jennifer would usually lounge around, hurling insults at me and even staying for dinner. I was left to prepare and clean up the meals alone, and they would arrogantly demand that I bring them more drinks and snacks, leaving me no peace. I rarely joined their conversations, but Jennifer once condescendingly said to me, "Elizabeth, why do you even work after getting married? Spending hours surrounded by old men making toys, I couldn't do that." Jennifer, being supported by Mike, doesn't work herself, and given her habit of skipping work, it's unlikely she would last long in any job. Hearing her gleefully talk about skipping past jobs, I sighed inwardly. Unable to tolerate Mike and Jennifer's selfish and tyrannical behavior any longer, I once again sought advice from James, only to be told, "Mike is still as rebellious as ever, but Jennifer isn't that bad, right?" But I'm being treated like a maid by Jennifer, feeling miserable. I have my job too, and my body can't take this anymore. Even so, what can I do? "This is troublesome," he would say, trying to play dumb and brush it off. However, at some point, the visits from Mike and Jennifer ceased. Whether they no longer wanted to see me or had other obligations such as work or finances, the reason was unclear. But their absence from our home was certain. Yet, it seemed James was still meeting with Mike and Jennifer. I could sometimes smell their perfume and cigarette smoke on James when he returned home. Being asthmatic, cigarette smoke could be deadly for me. So I had asked Mike and Jennifer to refrain from smoking inside the house when they visited. Regardless of my strained relationship with Mike, feeling at peace for not having to meet them was a relief. Above all, I was done dealing with their unbearable behavior. That's why I made an effort to convince James to ensure that Mike and Jennifer wouldn't interfere. Relieved that James agreed, the destination for our hot spring trip was set to Hawaii. I looked through the guidebook daily, bought new clothes, and eagerly awaited the trip. But the intrusion on the trip was completely unexpected. On the first day of the hot spring trip, we arrived at the security check for the Hawaii-bound plane, pulling our suitcases. Just as we were about to pass through the ticket gates with our boarding passes, there you are, both of you. "Elizabeth, long time no see. Turning around to the familiar voices, I was shocked to see Mike and Jennifer standing there. What? Why are you here? Didn't Dad tell you? We decided to come along to Hawaii. Hearing this, I was dumbfounded, then glared at James. Mike and Jennifer have always dreamed of going to Hawaii. I'll handle them, so please, let's go together. I was astounded. Knowing I was still being treated poorly, he still chose to prioritize Mike and Jennifer. All my efforts, including work and dieting for this day, were ruined. I decided to leave. There was no point in going to Hawaii with such unpleasant feelings. As I was about to turn back, Mike and Jennifer stopped me. For the past 11 years, I've wanted to reconcile with you, Mom. But I couldn't bring myself to be honest about it. And ended up behaving that way. I also realized my attitude wasn't right. I wanted to get along with you, Elizabeth. But I kept acting that way and felt awkward coming to your house. You understand, right? We don't want to strain the parent-child relationship any further. I was taken aback. It was the first time Mike had been so humble, let alone Jennifer. Not wanting to be seen as the villain, I reluctantly agreed to go to Hawaii with the four of us. Mike and Jennifer were in high spirits on the plane, ordering and starting to drink alcohol. James was also smiling happily next to me. Meanwhile, I felt an odd sense of unease but tried to distract myself by looking at the scenery outside the window. Upon arriving in Hawaii and renting a car, we started our trip based on the plan James revised on the plane. However, soon after, Mike and Jennifer began to ignore my presence and only spoke to James. At water-based attractions like the Sea Life Park and Waikiki Beach, they tried to trip me, making me fall and get soaked, and at lunch. They would push their leftovers onto me, among other forms of harassment. Feeling the tension, after dinner at the hotel we arrived at, Mike and Jennifer came to our room, wanting to drink alcohol. When James went to the store downstairs to get some snacks, Mike and Jennifer, who had bought alcohol in Hawaii, sat on my bed without asking. Then, Mike took out an ashtray and cigarettes from his pocket. Hey! This is a non-smoking room. Stop it, please. What? It's fine if we ventilate. Mike said with an annoyed look, and Jennifer also started to take out a cigarette to smoke. I reached my limit and found myself shouting. Enough. Stop smoking in a non-smoking room. You'll get us thrown out if you don't follow the hotel's rules. What's with you all of a sudden? I told you before that I have asthma and can't handle cigarette smoke. And please follow the hotel's rules. Annoying. Your serious, motherly attitude has always been so irritating. Smoking blatantly in a non-smoking room is the height of rudeness. God, you're so annoying. What's wrong with having fun on a trip? If you hate smoke so much, why don't you sleep in the parking lot or somewhere? As my head went blank from their words, James returned from his errand. Hey, it's loud even in the hallway. What's with the shouting? I can't stand being with these two for another second. Elizabeth, what happened? They're trying to smoke in a non-smoking room. And why did you bring them along despite me saying no? This is unbelievable. My pent-up emotions overflowed with tears. Mike and Jennifer looked down at me with a sneering laugh. You're just annoying, acting all high and mighty. You're no fun, not even drinking a single sip of alcohol. At Mike's words, I felt something snap inside me. Fine, I get it. I'd rather sleep outside than stay here. Bye. Hey, Elizabeth. I quickly gathered my valuables and phone and left the room. James tried to stop me by grabbing my arm, but I shook him off. Leave me alone. I want to be alone. I hurried out of the hotel and headed to the parking lot. There was no sign of James following me. I got into the parked rental car and drove around Hawaii at night to clear my head. Despite my suspicions, Mike and Jennifer hadn't changed their attitude towards me. And James was no better. Despite my desperate pleas, he brought Mike and Jennifer along without my consent. It seemed impossible to continue the family relationship with them after the trip. Especially considering the secret about James and Mike that I had kept as a wife and mother. The more I thought about it, the more anger and sadness overwhelmed me, so I kept driving to calm myself down. As I drove through Hawaii's beautiful night scenery, my heated mind finally cooled down. After driving for a while, tiredness set in, so I parked the rental car in a coastal park and decided to rest inside. I thought I heard sirens somewhere, but I was too exhausted to care and quickly fell asleep. When I woke up, dawn had broken, and the sparkling sea greeted me with its beauty. While soothed by the sea view, I had breakfast at a seaside diner, then remembered to check my phone. I had turned it off before the drive because I didn't want to hear from James and didn't even want to see his texts. Now calm, I turned on my phone, curious about what James and the others were doing. Then, I noticed an incredible number of missed calls and texts starting from around 11 o'clock last night. There were at least 30 or 40 of them. Right after being surprised by this, a call from James came in. "What the hell are you doing? Do you know how many times I've called and texted you?" James's voice was half angry, half crying. "What do you mean? I just had breakfast at a seaside diner." "What? While we're in deep trouble, you're casually having breakfast?" Mike's voice was also heard next to James, sounding irritated. "What trouble are you talking about? It's exactly as it sounds. After you left, the three of us had a little party with cigarettes, alcohol, and snacks, and before we knew it, we fell asleep. And when we woke up, the room was filled with smoke." "What? A fire?" "Yes. It seems the cause was Mike and Jennifer's cigarettes not being fully extinguished. And everyone was okay? Somehow it was just a small fire, but fire trucks came in droves, and everyone in the hotel had to evacuate. And now we're being blamed for causing it. Jennifer got a slight burn and was taken to the hospital. And now Mike and I have to go to the police for questioning and apologize to the hotel staff." "I see. The sirens last night must have been for that. And to think their carelessness caused such a commotion. I was beyond words." Then James, in his carefree and irresponsible manner, said, "So, we're tied up here and can't leave. Can you go to the hospital and stay with Jennifer?" "What?" The lack of an apology and prioritizing Jennifer over me. I guess some things will never change. That's why I gave James one last chance by asking, "James, who's more important to you, me or Mike and Jennifer?" "What? Why are you asking that now? This isn't the time." "I see. Well, bye then." I was completely disillusioned by James squandering this last chance. "Hey, what do you mean? Don't joke around at a time like this." "Well, Mike is your child with that woman, and it seems I'm no longer in your thoughts." What? That woman's child? What are you talking about?" Both James and Mike were perplexed by my words. I took a deep breath and decided to reveal the secret I had kept hidden. "Mike, you are the child of your father and his mistress." Mike was dumbstruck by my words, and James became even more flustered as I began to tell the secret. 24 years ago, James had an affair with a woman other than me. She was a subordinate at our workplace at the time. By the time I found out, the mistress was already pregnant. She arrogantly told me, "I'll give you the child, so don't demand any compensation." I thought she was the lowest of the low, but I was also torn. It seemed cruel to have the child only to abandon it in some institution. So, I decided to take in the child as mine and James's, without demanding any compensation from the mistress, who was then fired due to the scandal. James's affair also came to light, but taking the child as his own softened the blow. Even though we weren't blood related, I decided to raise the child as my own. Despite this decision, Mike's rebellious phase began when he entered middle school. I initially thought it was normal childhood behavior, but it continued into high school and university, getting worse over the years. Realizing that Mike was indeed the child of James and his mistress, I was bound by the affection I had developed for him over the years. Unable to cut ties. After explaining this, Mike, confused and shouting over the phone, said, "That can't be. I can't just be some bastard child. I have proof of your father's affair if you want to see it. I keep it with me all the time, thinking James might dispose of it if left at home." Lies. "So, you're saying you're not my real mother? That's what I've been trying to tell you. I tried to be a real mother, but I can't anymore. It's clear we don't get along because you have that woman's blood." After my words, Mike seemed to have run out of things to say, falling silent. Realizing the gravity of the situation, James raised his voice at me. "Hey. What are you saying? You promised you wouldn't tell Mike." "I don't care about that. Just be grateful for the 24 years I've put up with this. That's all." After that, James continued to rant over the phone, but naturally, I didn't entertain him and promptly hung up, blocking both him and Mike. Then, without visiting the hotel or the hospital, I enjoyed the Hawaii trip on my own and returned to New York before James and the others. Afterward, I packed my belongings, moved back to my parents' house, prepared the divorce papers, and sent them to James. Later, a colleague from work told me the aftermath of their hot spring trip. They were severely reprimanded by the police for their negligence with fire, and on top of that, the hotel demanded a hefty compensation for causing a commotion by smoking in a non-smoking room. James, Mike, and Jennifer had to somehow come up with the money. With the help of a lawyer hired by my parents, my divorce from James was successfully finalized. The divorce quickly became the talk of the office, and James's work performance declined until he eventually resigned quietly. I heard he struggled to find another job, ended up borrowing money from various acquaintances, and finally declared bankruptcy. Mike's income and mental state became unstable after the incident, leading to daily arguments with Jennifer due to the stress of their difficult life. As for me, I became completely enchanted by the charm of the hot springs during my solo trip and now go several times a year with my parents and friends. My work is going well, and my performance has been recognized, leading to my promotion to the head of the accounting department. I'm Emily, 34 years old. My husband Bob is 7 years younger at 27, and we don't have any children yet. Although I'm older, I never really felt the age difference while we were dating. But it became apparent when we decided to get married and I first went to greet Bob's parents at their home. Bob's parents, living in the countryside of the Northeast, were incredibly conservative and initially, they were quite opposed to me being older than Bob, saying things like, "They say you should search high and low for an older wife. But 7 years is too much. Can Emily even bear children properly? Won't her eggs age as she gets older?" Remarks that could potentially make enemies of most women. Although the father-in-law was rude, the mother-in-law outright rejected me. "I won't accept this. Why does Bob have to marry a woman who is 7 years older than him? It's too embarrassing to even mention to the neighbors. He will soon return here to take over the family business, and you, with your city upbringing, are not fit to be our daughter-in-law." Bob and I had been together for 6 years, and I had devoted almost all of my late 20s to him, so I had already decided to marry him. Rather, we had been living together for a few years, and I didn't have the energy to look for someone else. In my desperation, I pushed Bob into proposing, and he somehow agreed, though perhaps due to his youth or just his nature. He seemed to prefer keeping our relationship as it was. When faced with opposition from his parents, he quickly changed his tune, saying, "See, I told you it was too soon to get married. We can just register our marriage later." I told Bob, "No, it's not too soon. The age difference won't change no matter how many years pass." Before turning back to his parents and greeting politely, "I may indeed be older than Bob, but that's something I can't change. I will do my utmost to make you feel that I was a good choice for a daughter-in-law. I'm not perfect, but please accept me." The parents reluctantly agreed, but Bob's sister was vehemently against it, saying at our first meeting, "Just so you know, don't call me your sister-in-law. It's totally unacceptable for my brother's wife to be older than me." Looking back, I was naive, but with the odd confidence of a salesperson who had dealt with difficult clients at work, I thought I could handle it. This must be what they call bride bullying. I told myself it was lighter than what I'd seen on the internet and took the eventually moving back to the countryside to live with the in-laws lightly, even though it was news to me. I should have called off the wedding then, but as they say, hindsight is 20/20. A year has passed. I completely regret getting married. We had been living together before, and nothing much changed after submitting the marriage registration, in terms of work or lifestyle. But one major change was that Bob started getting frequent calls from his mother. I knew what they were about. When she's asking when we're planning to move back home, and probably also telling him to divorce me soon. Whenever the calls come, Bob would move to another room or the bathroom, trying to keep me from hearing. But given we live in a small apartment, it's easy to overhear. So whenever someone mentioned, "So, Emily was saying," I couldn't help but eavesdrop. And it seemed they were saying I was against the idea of returning to Bob's hometown to live with his parents. That's not the case at all. When I once asked Bob if he planned to return home someday, he said he didn't want to live somewhere where you can't walk to a convenience store. And there wouldn't be any work for him either. It seemed like he was the one who didn't want to go back. Bob was blaming me for things he didn't want to face himself. It's frustrating to see Bob making me out to be the bad guy as an excuse for his own reluctance to return home. Just now, I overheard Bob in the next room saying, "So if I bring up divorce, I'd have to pay alimony, right?" His reluctance to divorce isn't out of love for me, but because he doesn't want to pay alimony. Hearing Bob's true feelings was disappointing. Now might be the best time to consider divorce, while we don't have children. I secretly started thinking of a divorce. Without telling anyone. Just then, I got a call about Bob's sister getting married, so we ended up taking the express train back to his family's home for the wedding. Despite Bob being considered the heir, our wedding was just a small family dinner, while his sister's wedding was set to be a grand affair. Still, I didn't want to neglect my social obligations and create any fault on our part. The wedding was on the middle day of a 3-day weekend, so Bob and I stayed at his family's home from the day before. The groom of Bob's sister is from the neighboring city, and the wedding was to be held at a venue there. With the plan to go by a chartered bus with the relatives. On the day, as the family home was the gathering place, relatives started arriving in droves. The ceremony was just after 2 p.m. To avoid crowding the venue's dressing rooms, the venue staff, hairdressers, and dressers came to the house. And even Bob's parents were getting dressed up. Our event was more of a dinner than a wedding, so we just wore slightly nicer everyday clothes. But the difference in treatment was stark and astonishing. I changed into the dress I had splurged on for this day, did my makeup, and was setting my hair when my father-in-law said, "Hey, Emily. Serve some refreshments to the relatives who are waiting." So, with a smile, I handed out refreshments and repeatedly introduced myself as "Nice to meet you, I'm Bob's wife. Please enjoy the refreshments." Making sure to make my presence known with a smile like that of a professional TV announcer. Although my mother-in-law had told me to just stay in Bob's room, I wanted to make a good impression if I could. Soon after, the bus to take us to my sister-in-law's wedding venue arrived. The relatives boarded the bus with excitement, and when it was my turn to board, my mother-in-law exclaimed, "Wait a minute, Emily. I forgot the necklace." "The pearl necklace, can you get it?" "Really? With the formal dress?" She insisted. "It's in the drawer on top of the dresser in my room. It's a keepsake from my mother. Hurry and bring it." "Understood, I'll go look for it now." I rushed to my mother-in-law's room and searched the dresser drawer. But everything was so cluttered, and I couldn't find the necklace right away. Everyone else was already on the bus waiting, and I was getting anxious. Ah. Is this it? I think about 5 minutes had passed. I found a box that seemed right, checked inside, and hurried to the entrance, only to find the bus was gone. The entire in-laws family and Bob had left without me. You've got to be kidding. I rubbed my eyes a few times, but the bus was nowhere to be seen. I panicked and tried to look for my cell phone, only to remember it was in my bag. Since I left my bag with the luggage to be put on the bus, it must have gone without me. I knew the name of the venue but didn't have the phone number. Without my cell phone, I couldn't contact Bob, and without my wallet, I couldn't even take a taxi. What should I do? For a moment, I was in despair, but then I thought, wait, do I even need to go to the wedding? After all, the desire to celebrate the wedding had completely vanished. It wasn't just the first time meeting relatives, surely my in-laws and even Bob must have realized I wasn't on the bus. Yet, they left without me, which seemed overly malicious. The thought of divorce crossed my mind, but simply divorcing seemed too easy. Revenge was necessary. After a bit of thought, I came up with a plan. This is it. I stepped outside, saying, "Hello." I began my revenge with a smile. The relatives, in-laws, and Bob returned from the bus after 5 p.m. They were quite drunk. I had finished preparing for my revenge and had gathered all my belongings except for the bag that was taken on the bus. I looked up a taxi company's number in a phone book next to the in-laws' home phone and called right when the bus arrived, asking for a taxi in 30 minutes. Everything was ready. With an innocent face, I went out to greet them at the bus. Bob looked guilty when he saw me but said nothing. My in-laws ignored me, busy sending off the relatives. The relatives glanced at me but left in their cars. I wished Bob would at least apologize, but that's just the kind of man he was. With a smile, I said to Bob, "Welcome back." Bob looked relieved and started making excuses. "Hi. I didn't realize you weren't on the bus." I felt bad, but the ceremony was about to start, so I couldn't come to pick you up. I ignored Bob, silently searched through the luggage for my bag. As if. What a liar. And I told him to divorce. What do you mean by this? What's this? A joke? I really didn't notice. When Bob realized what he was told, he started to panic. Who knows? I'm surprised you think such a childish lie would work. So what if you didn't notice? Are you saying you couldn't remember I existed until you saw me? Both in-laws were terrible, but the real enemy was my husband, Bob. He was silent, unable to retort, but then my father-in-law, after seeing off the relatives, chimed in, "Come on. It was just a little forgetfulness on both our parts and Bob's." Bringing up a divorce over something like this, city brides really are spineless. It seemed he was in favor of the divorce. My mother-in-law, hearing about a divorce, smirked and said, "Just as I thought, a city bride won't do. She was never right for our family." That made me furious. How hypocritical. If that's the case, you should have just invited Bob to the wedding without me. Why did you make me come all this way just to leave me behind? Anyone would be furious with such harassment, whether they're a city bride or a country bride. When I yelled out, my mother-in-law yelled back, "We never intended to invite you in the first place. There wasn't even a seat prepared for you. But Bob brought you along by mistake, so we left you." What? I was stunned by the audacity, but as I glared, Bob quickly looked away and blamed his mother. "Well, Mom didn't clearly say to come alone. So? I thought it meant as a couple." My mother-in-law's unreasonable anger continued. "And why did you go around serving tea and introducing yourself as the bride?" At the venue, relatives were asking why the wife didn't come, unaware that Bob had a wife, making us embarrassed. "That's your own fault, and it's absurd to say I shouldn't introduce myself," I sneered. Actively introducing myself as Bob's wife to the relatives seemed to have had an effect. "So you never acknowledged me and planned to divorce me eventually. That's why you kept our wedding a secret from the relatives and made it seem like just a dinner party," I deduced. Neither my father-in-law nor my mother-in-law said anything, but it seemed I was right. I truly felt it was time to sever ties with such a family. "That's fine. I'll grant you your wish and divorce you. I'm better off without a mean family and an unreliable husband." I got into the taxi that had just arrived and returned to my apartment by the last train. Unable to sleep that night, I impulsively looked up lawyers online and packed my belongings. I managed to keep myself busy until dawn, and when I woke up late the next day, I had several missed calls from Bob and my in-laws. It seems my revenge worked well. After being left behind, I had thought of a revenge plan, but I didn't want to do anything dangerous or criminal. However, I didn't want to suffer silently and just divorce without doing anything. I remembered how my mother-in-law was concerned about the neighbors' opinions. There was a surplus of refreshments and nibbles she had bought for the relatives. I bagged them up and went around the neighborhood greeting everyone with a smile. "Hello. I'm Bob's wife." And I spilled everything about how I had been treated and left behind on the wedding day. And that evening, my mother-in-law and I had a loud argument outside. Of course, the whole neighborhood heard. A perfect revenge for an in-law family concerned about their image. Afterward, Bob and I divorced smoothly. The stories I shared were just casual conversations, so I wasn't sued for defamation. Having a lawyer helped me claim compensation for the abandonment and secure a satisfactory settlement. As for my sister-in-law, she self-destructed after marriage. She had hidden her harsh personality to get married, but people don't change easily. Her true colors showed, and the marriage quickly soured. She divorced and returned to her parents' home within 6 months, but by then, the wedding abandonment incident had become a notorious rumor. Eventually, the in-laws became known as a vile family that tormented their daughter-in-law, living much subdued lives. Bob's chances of finding a bride in his hometown seemed hopeless. I learned all this from a neighbor I had befriended and exchanged phone numbers with. Serves them right. As for me, the divorce felt like a fresh start. I regretted not seeing the true nature of Bob and his family earlier, but now I could see it clearly. Perhaps it would have been best to retreat immediately when faced with opposition at our first meeting, but I was immature. I don't want to negate the happy times we had together, so I consider the past year a lesson for my future. I'm relieved to have resolved the mess and moved on. Why won't you help me? Isn't it obvious? A smile escapes me at the sound of my husband's trembling voice. Seeing the shock on his face, I press further. Ever heard of the phrase, "You reap what you sow"? I want to share the story of how I, a pregnant woman, cornered my inept husband, and how it became the most satisfying moment of my life. My name is Linda. I'm a 26-year-old remote worker. Reluctantly, I agreed to live with my mother-in-law after being persuaded by my husband, Michael, who said there was a spare room at his parents' house and we could save money. Currently, the three of us live together. Initially, my mother-in-law, Jessica, seemed kind. Or so it appeared. In truth, she probably never was. Perhaps because I work from home, she seems to regard it as inferior to a job outside the house. You have it easy staying at home, so all household chores are your responsibility. Don't even think about slacking off, she said, imposing her rules and making snide remarks if everything wasn't done just so. Being competitive, I hated being belittled with, "Can't you even do this much?" and did the chores begrudgingly, always having been more efficient than most. It took me just 3 months to anticipate her complaints and retort with, "I've already taken care of that," much to her displeasure. She redirected her tactics to interfere with my work. Knocking during work hours, she'd say things like, "You missed a spot on the stove," or, "I want to eat pork for dinner, so please go buy some pork." Over trivial matters. When I wear headphones and decide to ignore her, the knocks turn into pounding, as if she's hitting the door. Continuing to ignore her would lead her to barge in. When confronted by an irate her asking why I wasn't responding, calmly replying, "I didn't hear you," or "Can it wait?" only showed her self-centeredness. When alone with Michael, I pleaded for him to do something, only to be met with a dismissive laugh and, "That's remote work for you. Mom will understand if you explain properly," he said, suggesting I handle it myself. Work is work, whether at home or elsewhere. Deadlines won't wait. At my breaking point, I firmly told her, "Please don't disturb me while I'm working. I'll attend to your needs later." Only for her to become infuriated. "How dare you? Putting household chores second. A woman's first duty are household chores. I won't allow such selfishness. Can't you consider my situation? Do you think someone who can't even fulfill her duties as a wife has the right to say that? I'm not neglecting the housework. It's just impossible to work with constant interruptions," I explained. All I hear is, "Disturbance this, disturbance that." What a cold-hearted daughter-in-law. The conversation was so frustrating, it gave me a headache. Out of desperation, I put a lock on the door to physically keep her out, which led to Jessica making a scene at dinner. "Michael, Linda is being awful. She put a lock on the door to keep me out." After enduring Jessica's ridiculous complaints and offering my rebuttal, Michael's response was lackluster. "Putting a lock on the door might be too much. Mom just wants to rely on you a bit. You have time to listen to her, right?" With a sigh, Michael took Jessica's side. "I'm sorry, but I really don't have the time," I responded, only to be met with his displeased frown. Jessica's whining voice saying, "That's terrible," was grating, making me feel nauseous. Although putting the lock on helped me get back on track with work, the lack of support from my husband only increased my distrust. Days later, the nausea persisted, and my health worsened. Suspecting something more, I took a pregnancy test, which came back positive. Realizing the nausea wasn't caused by Jessica but was due to pregnancy was a relief. When I told Michael, who had been in a bad mood, his demeanor instantly changed for the better. When he smiles and gently strokes my belly, I can't help but feel good. His offer to help, saying, "Is there anything I can do?" made me realize he probably had no idea what to do. But I appreciated his concern nonetheless. Meanwhile, Jessica's jealousy of our couple-like interactions intensified her harassment. "You know child-rearing is a woman's job, so don't think you can take advantage of Michael's kindness," she would say whenever he went to work. In my time, slacking off wasn't allowed. Even with morning sickness, I didn't suffer as much. It's all about mindset. Enough with the coddling. She followed me around, criticizing my actions and not letting me rest. When you're in this state during pregnancy, whether it's stress or not, I worry about the future. "It might be best if I take care of the grandchild when it's born," Jessica said during dinner. Being emotionally unstable, I found myself shouting, "The cause of my stress is you, Jessica." Well, what a thing to say. Jessica turned her gaze towards Michael. Wandering aimlessly, Michael said in a feeble voice, "Mom means well for you, you shouldn't speak to her like that." As expected, Michael was on Jessica's side. The shock of being betrayed by a seemingly kinder Michael was significant. I wondered if I could even raise a child in this environment. For the first time, the thought of divorce crossed my mind. 3 months passed, the morning sickness subsided, and my emotional instability returned to normal, but Jessica's attitude remained unchanged. She was relatively quiet in front of Michael, but she became emboldened when he turned a blind eye. While I was worrying and consulting with my family, thinking I need to do something about this, Michael was informed of a short-term transfer. He was assigned to a branch in the same state as my parents' home for about 2 years. That's when I had a brilliant idea. I casually suggested to Michael, who was reading rental magazines, "Why don't you live at my parents' house since there's room?" Disliking complications, Michael immediately agreed. My parents readily approved, and Michael smoothly convinced Jessica, quickly settling the matter of living together. Unlike my in-laws' house, my parents' home was stress-free. Being their only daughter, my parents doted on me. They were already aware of the treatment I received at my in-laws and were far more furious about it than I was. The way my parents treated Michael, now living with us, was rather insidious. "Hey, are you still sleeping? Get up and clean around the house," my father would say, waking Michael early on weekends. For my husband, who was used to sleeping until noon at his mother's place, this must have been a torment. Moreover, it was under the watchful eye of my father. "What's with that wiping? There are fingerprints. Wipe it all over again." Unlike Jessica, he wasn't pointing out non-existent dirt, but it still felt a bit pitiful to hear. "Oh dear, why don't you help with household chores just because you're done with work? You must have been spoiled by your mother, expecting meals to just appear." My mother, as if in competition, also put Michael to work relentlessly. Michael, good-natured on the outside like Jessica, could only nod and not complain in front of my parents. "Come on, Linda, help me out," he said, looking at me lounging in front of the TV. When I reluctantly offered to help, my sharp-eyed mother scolded, "Don't make your pregnant wife do chores. Where's your consideration as a husband?" Michael looked dejected after being scolded. I thoroughly pretended not to notice. Complaints about a misplaced bath cover, being reprimanded for only being able to work, and a restful weekend became a distant dream. One day, when Michael's sighs at home became more frequent, "I've been patient, but this is too much. I'm doing my best here." Finally, at the dinner table, Michael voiced his feelings. "But that's just your opinion," said my father. "Father is saying this for your sake, Michael. But that way of speaking isn't right, is it?" I interjected, backing my father up. Stunned, Michael's lips trembled. "Why won't you help me?" "Of course not," I say, laughing. "What? How can you be so cold when your husband is being bullied? You know the saying, you reap what you sow?" I asked. Even when I was struggling with your mother, you just ignored it. Remember how you laughed it off and took her side when I asked for help? He must be reminded of something. He just opens and closes his mouth, speechless. I was just following your lead, I said before leaving the room, having said my piece. Left behind, Michael seemed to get a thorough talking to from my parents. My husband, now visibly shaken, endured the usual educational lectures from my parents, saying, "This is also Linda's pain." Though it seemed superficial, he appeared to be reflecting on his actions. A few months later, our daughter was safely born. By then, Michael had become a doting and good father, seemingly well-trained. I was appalled when he said he was caught between a mom and you and didn't know what to do about the harassment. But it's true that he has been much better since we distanced ourselves from Jessica. "Thank you for such a lovely daughter," he said, causing me to do a double take. It's amazing how much influence a child can have. I found myself bewildered by the pleasant change. Finally, as our daughter's neck was strong enough, Michael and I visited his mother to show her our child. Jessica smiled and said, "Oh, how adorable," upon seeing her granddaughter. Expecting her to immediately ask to hold the baby, I was surprised when we were instead invited to the living room. "I'll make some tea." My husband, now fully capable of doing household chores, headed to the kitchen while still holding our daughter. Laughing, I said, "Michael just can't bear to be apart from his daughter," which drastically changed Jessica's expression. "What's so funny? Making your husband do such disgraceful things." "Excuse me?" He is pathetic. Getting all excited just because a daughter was born. He wanted to keep the baby's gender a surprise until birth. But I should have insisted on testing. A girl, what a disappointment. Jessica's expression was one of utter disdain. Testing. What would she have done if she knew it was a girl from the beginning? I was speechless with horror. You really are a useless wife. Don't expect me to dote on a daughter. I won't bother with her. Just as Jessica said that inside, the living room door opened. "Mom, I can't forgive what you just said," Michael stated firmly, causing her to go pale. "Michael, I didn't mean. I treasure my daughter. I've realized how inadequate I've been. Linda is too good for me. Please apologize to her." "I won't. I'm not in the wrong. It's this insolent wife of yours." "Fine. The moment you said we should have tested, I thought you were out of your mind. Come on, Linda, let's go home." Michael reached out to me. "No, Michael, please." Jessica's demeanor was that of a woman being abandoned. I stood up, taking my husband's hand. "Just so you know, I won't let my family live with you anymore. I'm terrified of what you might do." Michael quietly declared our estrangement. My parents, having overheard everything, were surprised by Michael's stance. My father, slightly disgruntled, muttered, "Our guidance must have worked," while my mother openly rejoiced. While Michael has indeed changed, I'm not fully ready to trust him yet, and forgiveness won't come easily. But part of me is glad he stood up to Jessica so firmly. I plan to keep an eye on my husband's future actions. As for Jessica, she seems unrepentant, still trying to send apologies to my husband. "With an apology to me, what's the point?" my husband says, clearly exasperated. He's declared that even if we had a son, he would never allow Jessica to meet him. This retaliation, aimed at my husband, inadvertently served as a comeback against Jessica as well, keeping her beloved son away from her. The primary source of our stress. Though my initial intent was solely to get back at my husband. The bonus of giving Jessica a taste of her own medicine makes this outcome all the more satisfying. At least for now, I'm feeling on top of the world.